Hello and welcome back to the battle room. So today I have a very different type of battle. So recently I participated in the Victory Road tournament, which was the first ever BDSP tournament, and I decided to showcase one of my matches that I had there. So this is more match analysis and just breaking down the match, and this is obviously happening after the match already occurred. So it's a little bit of a different type of insight. Obviously most of the content I make is usually for me analyzing the match while I'm playing it. So this is against MarcoFiero, who, for those who do not know, is a international champion. Right before COVID happened, he won the last event we had, which was obviously really impressive. Internets aren't easy, and so let's see how well he is in BDSP. He's obviously still incredible in Sword and Shield, and I expect the same in BDSP. So Marco's team is pretty standard. It's a team that topped the ladder, Lukamir's team. So I knew the team going into it, and obviously it's open team sheet. So with that in mind, I knew what I had to do here, and I knew how the matchup generally plays out because I had practiced before against this team. So for the most part, my main game plan is to Thunderwave the Arcanine and try to take control of the Arcanine so that my Scizor can take over the game. Ideally trying to get a Thunderwave on Arcanine, but obviously sometimes it's not as easy as it may seem, especially when there's open team sheets involved. So I decided to lead with Arcanine, I decided to lead with T-Tar plus Zapdos into Arcanine Gastrodon. Obviously the lead is pretty good for me. Gastrodon is kind of annoying though because I'm not really threatening it in any offensive way. Zapdos cannot touch Gastrodon whatsoever. But I do have a lot of threat onto Arcanine, and if I kill Arcanine, Scizor can just go absolutely crazy. That's the big game plan here, is to try and enable Scizor. So I go for a Rock Slide plus Thunder Wave, but my opponent correctly predicts that Arcanine is a threat and basically uses my Rage and Hyper Offense targeting towards the Arcanine and use that against me and goes for Protect. So I basically waste the turn and they get a free Ice Beam. It was just a great turn from Marco. Very safe turn. I can't really punish it too much. Even if I like Crunch plus switch to something, it's not a huge deal overall. Arcanine is incredibly bulky and can stand against some of the best Pokemon. So I thought it was a really safe play, and it was a really good play from Marco. So on turn 2 here, Arcanine is still one of my biggest priorities, but I also know that their only ground type is on the field, which means Thunderwave is still free because nothing can switch into that. Latios doesn't want it. The only Pokemon that really could is the Lumberry T-Tar, which is something I did not fully account for when making this play, but even still, I thought breaking Lumberry is still a positive trade for me because I can potentially Will-O-Wisp Tyranitar later. Tyranitar is a very obnoxious Pokemon as well, but Thunderwaved or Burned, it is less of a threat. Obviously, I know Tyranitar is obnoxious. I'm using it. So I'm continuing to just put pressure on Arcanine. Again, gotta kill Arcanine because my Tyranitar and Zapdos are my main Arcanine killers, and Scizor and Arcanine in the back aren't very good versus Arcanine. So it is imperative that I don't lose too much of these Pokemon or risk losing the game because I don't have anything to actually threaten Arcanine. So we heal off some damage from an Ice Beam. Again, it was a good switch from my opponent. They're playing, these first 2 turns definitely are in the favor of Marco. That doesn't mean I'm out of it. A lot of these BDSP games are very, very defensive, and comebacks can occur very easily, especially with stuff like Roost Zapdos. Scizor can just pop off if I get a crucial crit or KO onto Arcanine. So you never feel really out of it just because Scizor, I have a team that can come back well. So right here, our opponent does switch into Scizor. I get this free Roost off, which is really, really nice because Zapdos is very difficult to KO as it is, and getting a Roost off is really nice. The only way I'm punished is if, let's say my opponent went for a nasty, nasty Earth Power reading my Roost, which they do. So here comes a nice good old EP onto Zapdos, which is unfortunate, but I'm still getting kind of free damage with Tyranitar. Like, Tyranitar's not being threatened whatsoever, and I'm just spamming Rock Slide. So like, any of these flinches could come through, it could instantly change the tides. But at this point, I need to get Tyranitar out of there because Tyranitar is super duper important. It's one of the best ways I'm beating this Arcanine. And also, I really, really can't afford to lose Tyranitar. So Arcanine's going to come in, and I'm just going to continue to try and Roost here. Potentially, if they try to read this or try to go for an EP on the T-Tar, there's Roost would be relatively 3, and I do think Zapdos is good in this matchup still. It really just can't beat Gastrodon, but everything else, Zapdos is looking fantastic versus. So I go for the Roost again, just hoping for no, potentially no EP, and potentially no, X Scissor or double tap on a Zapdos. But that is exactly what happens. We take the X Scissor, Static comes through though, which is like kind of appreciated just because para chances are always great. And then here comes the EP, but it is on Arcanine, so that's good. A relatively good turn for me, all things considered. Special defense falls, which is a little unfortunate because I could potentially go for Snarl here, and I would potentially live. But because of that special defense drop, I do have to play a little bit differently here. Arcanine, again, is still super important. If I do manage to KO Scizor, my Scizor does do well against Tyranitar and Gastrodon. So Arcanine, and without Arcanine, the enemy Scizor is a little bit scary. So here I decide to just go for Snarl to try and hedge my bets and try to allow myself to potentially live. Actually, I go back and go for Protect because I realize the special defense will probably ultimately get me killed, and I decide to try to go for a free roost here. Again, my Arcanine is super important kill as well because a lot of this format is just killing the enemy fire type so that your Scizor can win. And sometimes it's just a game of like who can position their fire type and their Scizor better. And that's just how the game can be sometimes, and that's definitely the case in this matchup. So I will be going for Protect here, Arcanine defending itself, and then Zapdos is going to go for another Roost. Just hoping that the Earth Power is going to go into the Arcanine slot, because I do want the Zapdos to be healthy. It's going to be a big factor in winning this game. So then we're going to see Scizor go for Swords Dance and Earth Power come through on a Gastrodon, basically allowing either outcome to be a good one. Either Arcanine goes down to Earth Power, or Scizor gets a Swords Dance if I were to Protect. So it's just a really safe and good play from Marco. And at this point now, I'm in a really awkward spot because I use my Protect, which means Scizor could Protect freely here, and Gastrodon would threaten the KO. And then I would be facing and looking down a +2 Scizor. So I opt to conserve Arcanine, get rid of that special defense drop, and switch into my own Scizor. And then I decide, Zapdos still has a lot of pressure on, and Scizor is still a threat. So I opt to Thunderbolt Scizor as well, just because getting damage into Scizor is really important, because it is at +2 now, and regardless of the situation, I need to kill Scizor. And to do that, I'm going to need my Zapdos. So I swap into my Scizor. They go for Protect here, because they're trying to, again, fish out because I did Protect, so they can safely Protect. And then my Arcanine would faint, so this is just a really safe, good play from them. But I do manage to defuse the situation a little bit. I make Scizor take the damage, which isn't a huge deal. Scizor is a great Pokemon, but it really is good versus Gastrodon and T-Tar, and there's still a lot of game to be played, and I think Scizor can still navigate itself into a good position. But I definitely think that we're kind of getting bogged down here, and my opponent is playing better than I, and I haven't really had offensive pressure since turn 1 and 2, but even then, turn 1 and 2, they played incredibly well and positioned their Pokemon better than me. So Thunderbolt's going to come through on a Scizor, doing a really good chunk. One of the good things about Zapdos is it's a very positive matchup versus Scizor. I'm going to get a Swords Dance off here, which is really good for me, just because I do need some sort of pressure here, and Scizor and Gastrodon aren't doing the most damage to me in the big picture of the game. Scizor's actually going to get fully paralyzed as well, which is incredible for me, because that means I didn't take any damage that turn from Scizor. So I just get to freely press U-turn and Thunderbolt here, and no matter the situation here, I'm going to be in a good one. One of the downsides to U-turn is that I can't really like just hit Gastrodon and not switch out. But in this situation, the upside to U-turn shows itself as well, where I'm going to get away from the Arcanine and position myself into a better spot almost instantaneously. The Scizor gets paralyzed again, but that's okay. I mean, Bullet Punch was kind of scary. It is at +2. I didn't intimidate it. So it could have been a kind of a scary situation. It could have gotten the KO onto Scizor potentially. But the Paralyze comes through. The U-turn comes through. Arcanine is taking a little bit of damage, which is very appreciated, and we get a free switch into our own Arcanine to get the Intimidate off onto their Arcanine and potentially start threatening a Will-O-Wisp onto T-Tar, a Snarl onto Gastrodon. Just a really good situation for me. So we're going to see Tyranitar come in here, which again, I am threatening a Will-O-Wisp, which is a really good positional tool, just because it's not something you ever want to take with a physical attacker. And I'm going to press that button, and I'm going to press Thunder Wave onto Arcanine. Going for double status here is really beneficial, just because only one Pokemon can switch because Scizor's fainted. So Gastrodon can take a Thunder Wave or a Wisp, but at the end of the day, it's still a good situation for me. Tyranitar is going to protect itself. So they do dodge both statuses, which isn't very, very fortunate for me. But it does, you know, it's not a huge deal because I can threaten next turn if I so desire. I'm actually going to go for Will-O-Wisp onto Tyranitar. Tyranitar unfortunately avoids, which would have been very, very big. This play does kind of cover for both an Arcanine switch in and a Tyranitar staying in, just because Wisp is covering for the Arcanine, or for the Tyranitar, and Thunderbolt is covering for the Arcanine. So the miss there is really unfortunate because we would have taken less damage on the Zapdos, and also Arcanine had potential to live and proc the berry and just put ourselves into a fantastic position. But it is what it is. Wisp is a very inaccurate move, as we know. But the situation is still definitely winnable. It's just navigating our... it's going to be about navigating our Tyranitar to success here, because Tyranitar is one of the only Pokemon that can win in this situation, because Scizor cannot beat Arcanine. So it's imperative that Tyranitar carries the rest of the game here. So we're going to actually see the Tyranitar outspeed my Zapdos, which is not something I expected, and something that I actually did not account for when making the EV spread. It was actually speed time with Tyranitar, and I found that out after the effect because I was very, very confused on why my Zapdos wasn't able to move there. But it was because I messed up the EV spread, which is really, really unfortunate to like have the speed tie there. But like at the end of the day, you got to make sure you're, you know, checking those kind of things, making sure your Pokemon are good to go, because yeah, something like that happens is really, really unfortunate. And speed tying max speed Tyranitar, in past meta is not really a big deal, but in this meta, max speed Tyranitar with Dragon Dance is very, very common and something that is very, very real. I don't know if I was necessarily winning regardless of the speed tie, but it is something that I was frustrated with going into this game. The Wisp was also really, really sad for me, but you know, it's Pokemon, and I know I can bounce back and play better going into game 2. So after game 1, I realized that Gastron was kind of an issue, and also I felt that the way I played my Tyranitar wasn't as well as I could have. I thought I was getting kind of bogged down by his defensive switching, and he was putting himself in a constant better position, and I wasn't really getting into a better position myself. He was constantly outplaying me, and I definitely felt like I was playing too slow, and I needed to make some sort of reads to try and combat his defensive switching, and I just needed to play better. It didn't necessarily feel like a team gap, but it was more of just me not playing as optimally or punishing his defensive play, because, like, you know, I make a brick break on Arcanine as it switches to T-Tar, and that might just win the game. So I need to make sure that I'm playing much better and that I'm not letting him just kind of walk all over me defensively in a way. So I thought a lot of my Pokemon were still good, like my choices weren't necessarily incorrect, and that I just needed to potentially slow down Gastrodon with potentially Snarls, and also I decided to bring my own Gastrodon this time, because Scizor really, really wasn't working out as well as I would have hoped. So I opted to bring Gastrodon instead of Scizor, just as another answer to Arcanine, and I don't want to have to dance around their Arcanine with my own Scizor, so I decided to make it a little bit easier for myself and bring Gastrodon this time. I also thought Gastrodon was just good against all the Pokemon that he brought. So we're going to see Gastrodon and Arcanine lead into my Arcanine plus Zapdos lead, which I think is good for me. A free Snarl on turn 1 is potentially huge. Threatening Thunder Wave is nice. Just to break the Lumberry too, because I will be threatening a potential Wisp on turn 2. So I think my lead adjustment here is pretty good. I think Arcanine is just a great lead in general, but it does pay dividends here. And I just auto-lock that Snarl in right away, and I decide to also just press Thunder Wave onto Arcanine. Again, the only ground type on the game is right there, right in front of me. So this is a really, really safe potential play, especially when I can threaten Wisp on turn 2. Because Tyranitar did cause a lot of issues. It ended up sweeping my endgame with the dodge Wisp. So like getting Wisp on a T-Tar could be potentially game winning for me. So I'm just going to play to that win con. So Gastrodon's going to withdraw here, which isn't a big deal to me into Tyranitar. It does mean it's dodging a Snarl, which is, you know, not the biggest deal ever. Snarl's still going to do free damage. Like, we are doing free damage this turn with Snarl, and we're taking some sand damage. So, like, it's basically kind of a wash of a turn. Again, a good defensive switch, but I didn't really have any way to punish that outside of, like, will-o-wisping or like thunder-waving the Gastrodon slot and like going for a crazy read where I was just playing relatively safe. But again, like I did mention that I need to make punishes, but that was one I wasn't going to be able to make with an Arcanine and a Zapdos versus Tyranitar. So we take that sand damage, but now it isn't a bad situation, but it's not a great one. Gastrodon does look relatively free as a switch-in, just because I'm able to bring Gastrodon in. There's nothing really threatening it. And I go for Volt Switch here actually because I'm pretty sure that Gastrodon is coming in to absorb the T-Wave. It's really, really safe and I can't punish it with my 2 Pokemon. So I decide to Volt Switch the Tyranitar because I want to get potentially defensive pivots going and to pivot in something that could react better to the situation. If Arcanine stays in, then I can play accordingly, but Gastrodon did switch in, so now I can adjust myself. So I'm going to swap in Arcanine here, get the Intimidate onto Tyranitar. You know, obviously there's a potential Rock Slide, but it's not a huge deal. I'd rather just Intimidate Tyranitar now. Zapdos does function as an answer to Scizor as well in the late game. So having Arcanine here, potentially taking a Rock Slide isn't the end of the world. It doesn't do too much because of Intimidate. Gastrodon does dodge, not a big deal, obviously. Like, I am a ground type. But now we're in a somewhat decent position here. We're threatening Snarl, we're threatening Wisp, we're threatening a Protect. And we do have a Gastrodon who can just spam Earth Powers, which is really, really good for me as well. So I will go for Snarl here, just because I want to weaken that Gastrodon and potentially set my Arcanine up to survive a Rock Slide plus Earth Power with the use of my Big Berry. So I press Snarl, and then I am going to press Earth Power onto Tyranitar. Tyranitar is going to dance up with the Dragon Dance, but that's not a huge deal just because I can just press Earth Power onto it. It's going to take some damage. As long as a bunch of crazy flinches don't happen, Tyranitar is low enough that Gastrodon can still pick up that KO. I do get yawned here on a Gastrodon, which isn't great, because now that does mean I am in a weird position next turn, because Gastrodon could go for Earth Power, but that would mean my doom because I would go fall asleep. So that's not a great outcome either. If they protect and I go for Earth Power, I could lose the game instantly. But at the same time, they know that's the case, so that means they could just go for it and just attack me. It's really hard to say, especially from a player like Marco, who is a fantastic competitor and someone that I think is very, very good at the game, and someone that's definitely shown how good they can be in this current format and in formats past. So like, this is kind of a weird situation. Like, against a normal player, I would just think, oh, I'm just gonna switch for sure. But against Marco, I'm second guessing myself. I'm like, well, he might just attack knowing I have to switch. So I'm going to opt to switch here, and I'm going to protect. I'm going to play it safe, but at the same time, there is that possibility to just press Earth Power. I really could have. And they do attack with Tyranitar. So I potentially could have just pressed Earth Power. He's obviously covering his odds a little bit by Rock Sliding. I could flinch, and then I'd be sleeping, which wouldn't be great either. But, you know, I could have went for that Earth Power, and it might have put me in a better spot because I do make my Tyranitar take a ton of damage, which isn't great for me. And I do get a special defense drop as well. But again, it was a really weird turn, and like it may seem really obvious to just switch out, like he is going to protect Tyranitar, but you never know. So now I'm going to switch back into Gastrodon, and I'm going to try to reposition myself into a way I can kill this Tyranitar. Not having Scizor in this situation is really, really unfortunate, though. I'm not going to lie, because Scizor would have been obviously able to just Bullet Punch. There wouldn't be chances for flinches. There wouldn't be chances for any BS. I would have just Bullet Punched, Tyranitar's fainted, or they have to switch. So it would have been a really good situation to have Scizor, and I'm not going to lie, instead of Tyranitar, because Tyranitar just took a beating there. So, like, maybe I was right with Scizor on game 1, and maybe I should have just played better in game 2. Tyranitar will go for Protect here, which, you know, is kind of unfortunate, because I was trying to get that KO with Rock Slide. But I'm also covering myself by potentially getting a flinch on the Gastrodon. Rock Slide does work wonders like that. Flinches can be game changers. And we don't get the flinch, and we do get yawned onto our Gastrodon once again, which isn't great. But it does mean that I can Intimidate again, which isn't a huge, huge deal. So I will go for Rock Slide here just to, you know, get that KO onto Tyranitar, and I'm going to switch into Arcanine just to weaken Tyranitar again with Intimidate. Intimidate is one of the best abilities ever. Obviously, this game is showcasing how good Intimidate can be and how necessary it is. I'm a big Intimidate stan. I use it on every team. I think every team needs Intimidate. I will not play a team without it, unless I have screens. Then, if I ever reflect, I'm also feeling pretty good. But for the most part, I love Intimidate. It's so freaking good. And you can see here, Rock Slide comes through. And I just need to get this KO onto their Tyranitar. My Arcanine does go down, unfortunately. But if I get this Rock Slide off, you know, I put myself into a somewhat decent spot. Not really decent, but I can win the game, I should say. I can win the game. But this Gastron is giving me endless trouble with the Yawn Spam and EP. Gastron is just performing so well for MarcoFiero, showing why it's such a good Pokemon. They even Ice Beam just in case I switch into Zapdos, which is just a really solid play. Like, just covering almost anything I can do. There's a reason Marco is a international champion, and it's being showcased right now. So Arcanine's going to come in, my Gastron comes in, and so does my Zapdos. So I'm down to 2 Pokemon, and Zapdos cannot beat the Gastron. So I'm in a really, really tricky spot because I have to rely on Gastron to beat Gastron. Otherwise, Zapdos will automatically lose in the late game, and I simply cannot win. So I'm going to go for Thunder Wave plus Protect here because I don't want to get snarled. I need to do as much damage as humanly possible with my own Gastrodon. And basically at this point, Marco just needs to spam Snarl, and his Gastrodon will win the game. Just because I can't Snarl his Gastrodon. So his Gastrodon will be doing full damage to Earth Powers, and mine will not. So he makes the easy, safe play of pressing Protect here to predict my Protect, so he can get a guaranteed Snarl off on me on the next turn, and then he's just going to spam Yawn into Gastron. Like, he doesn't care about Zapdos. Marco knows that all he has to do is kill my Gastron or weaken my Gastron in a way, and then he can slowly start chipping down Zapdos. Because Zapdos can't touch Gastron. So Snarl's going to come through. At this point, I would say that is the nail in the coffin. The final nail. Gastron is snarled. Like, I would need like insane luck, like 3-4 crits, like maybe a freeze on the Gastrodon like could do it. That would be like my best play. Just because the snarl is brutal. Like, I would need incredible luck to escape my my fate here. Earth Power does good damage. Like, Expert Gastrodon is pretty fun. But you know, it's too late. It's too late here. All they have to do is double protect. They don't even have to. They can just spam snarl anyways. Like, it's not even a big deal. So now I make it my goal to kill Arcanine, even though protect is very obvious. But at this point, I need something like maybe a Para here so I can actually get the KO on Arcanine. But they're not even going to go for protect there. They're just going to try to get another Snarl off because that's all they really need to do. They do have a Scizor on the back, I believe, but I don't think we've actually seen them on, but you know, presumably Scizor. Doesn't really matter at this point what it is because it's just going to body it doesn't even need to body anything. It just needs to kill Gastrodon, and then their Gastrodon automatically wins against Zapdos. So, yeah, and we're gonna be sleeping because of Yawn. So it's not a great situation. But we are at -1 instead of like, you know, minus 2 because they did go for Flare Blitz. But you know, it's a little too late. The burn's actually a little bit nice because I can't get Yawned by the enemy Gastrodon now. So Zapdos will remain, you know, good and healthy and ready to combat my opponent a little bit for a couple turns as it slowly dies to Ice Beam potentially. But yeah, the situation is mighty grim here. Scizor will show its stupid little bug face, and it's gonna be able to just take the dub here. Basically, it's like a slow drawn out end game of just, you know, hoping to wake up and then just double attacks on the Gastrodon. Like, it doesn't even matter. They could kill either Pokemon. Scizor could Swords Dance pretty freely because Zapdos, while good against Scizor, doesn't actually provide a ton of pressure, especially when snarled. It's just more of Scizor can't really kill you super fast. So it's still a pretty grim situation here. Marco's going to prioritize killing Zapdos with that Ice Beam there. It's a critical hit, but you know, I'm not getting upset about that one because that one just actually speeds up the video here. So in retrospect, I'm kind of happy I got crit there, so I have to talk less. I'm gonna die at this point to burn, so that's not good. If I get Bullet Punched, I'm down. Bullet Punch plus Earth Power into my Zapdos is extremely safe. There's nothing I can do to stop that. The Bullet Punch comes through. That is a dead Zapdos. And now it is Gastron versus the world against the +2 Scizor, by the way, while I'm at -1. And sleeping. And there's a Yawn Gastrodon. So the situation is just not good. I try to press EP in the scissor, but, you know, what am I to do? What am I to do? It's a slow death for Gastrodon. I do wake up, though, and I do press Earth Power. So that's good for Gastrodon. Showing us a little damage before the the ride home. But basically, I think this matchup is a little bit hard for me, and I think that's something I should have considered going into the tournament. I think that the matchup isn't as good as I'd want it to be, and I think that's something, this team was one that I knew of, and when I practiced against it, I felt like confident, but obviously a player like Marco is going to bring the team to another level. So I do think that, you know, maybe I should have had better matches versus it, been a little bit more well planned, just because it was such a problem for me to deal with. And, you know, that's something I learned from going to the tournament. Also, Marco's a fantastic player, so it doesning feel super bad losing to Marco, but it was round 1 of the tour, which is really unfortunate to pull such a good opponent. But it is what it is. I think next time I think something to take away is just to prep more against these type of teams. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great and amazing day, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Bye.